Hello and welcome to the first episode of the EAGE Petroleum show. My name is Ahmed Selem and I'm here to speak to you about a very important topic: breathing life into Egypt's dying energy sector, a report published by oilprice.com. Everyone knows what has been happening in Egypt for the last 2 years in terms of the uprising and the political unrest. But only few know how the energy sector was affected from this. When Hosni Mubarak was taken down in the 2011 revolution, the energy sector went with him. Since then, it has been a long stream of bad news for the energy sector and its foreign investors, most of whom has to withdraw non-essential personnel in the aftermath of the 30th of June protests. So now, with the energy sector pretty much out of control, domestic demand on the rise with shortfall threatening further stability, and $6 billion in debts owed to foreign investors, the interim government is trying to put things right, sort of. And here comes the good news. Late October and early November have seen some indications of compromise over the energy sector. The interim government has signed 9 new oil and gas exploration deals onshore, representing the investment of $470 million that should see the drilling of 15 new wells in the Gulf of Suez, the chaotic Sinai, and the eastern and western deserts. But are these new deals enough to keep investors in Egypt? Kind of. It's a start, but oil companies will demand more if Cairo wants to see them increase production. And without key concessions to foreign companies to develop offshore, there won't be much advancement. On the other side, the contracts do not reflect the high cost of ultra-deep water exploration and infrastructure. So investors will only look onshore as offshore isn't worth it. And this explains why all the agreements I mentioned earlier were all onshore. What should the government do to fix this? Simple answer: reforming pricing arrangements. Otherwise, investors will be less than motivated to move offshore and tap into Egypt's gas-rich waters. And just to give you an idea of how bad the situation is for foreign investors in Egypt, right now the government pays offshore gas producers around $2 to $3 per million British thermal units. This compares to $10 for UK gas and $17 for Asian supplies. And on top of that, the government assumes ownership of half the gas produced. So there's hardly much incentive for investors. There are 2 main issues that make up the dilemma in Egypt: the unpaid debts and the subsidies. In September, the government announced it was considering plans for restructuring over $6 billion in debts owed to foreign oil and gas companies. But the government should take these plans seriously, because a lot of new investment will depend on whether Egypt will be able to pay its debts or not. In terms of subsidies, a whopping 59% of the government's total budget expenditure this year went towards the subsidized commodities and the repayment of public debt. Petroleum subsidies have risen by 25.6%, and this explains where the debt came from. There were initial hopes that the military-backed government would lean more towards reducing subsidies so they can pay the debt. But it turned out that they don't have enough bravery to do so and would prefer to put the subsidy reform burden here on the next regime. BG Group, one of the largest gas producers in Egypt, is delaying new investments in the country at the moment and has put its West Delta Marine project on hold. And BG executive summed up the whole situation in Egypt when he said that Tunisia is now considered a much better venue. But still, investors are looking at the bigger picture here, the one that shows no advancement in Egypt without heavy reforms. Paying the debts owed to foreign oil and gas companies would necessitate a heavy reform, and specifically a reduction in subsidies that account for more than 1/5 of the entire budget. Thank you for watching, and I hope I managed to give you an insight into some of the issues the energy sector in Egypt is facing.